I would say look for a good core set of books, something that's going to help you and augment you, and then stick to that. Stick to your calendars and stick to your goals as much as you can, because things will come up, and practice in real lifetime settings. When I sat for my Mcat, the first question I got, I had no clue what the answer was. Like, I hadn't even heard of it. So I stared at the screen for about 5 to 7 minutes, thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm never gonna be a doctor. Like, I should just get up and walk away right now. And it took me that long to try to prep myself up and move on. So the skills that we're teaching you here is so that you don't spend those 7 minutes on a question that you're not likely to get right. And you can spend those 7 minutes on the 10 questions that you're likely to get right.
There was once, I think it was in my STEP exam, step 1, the first 3 questions in one section, I had no clue, absolutely no clue. And this was right after having taken a very difficult section. So I felt that my exam score was gonna be super low. And I was like, where am I gonna go into residency? This is what you get. And so I had to turn that around, and I had to start thinking positive and say, Jose, you have 2 more hours to take the exam. You can do this. Keep on working. Like, you're going to do it. You're going to get a really high score. And the type of attitude that you have while you're taking the exam, somehow, I've discovered this, has a lot to do with the kind of score that you're going to get.
I'm a guy who took the MCAT 3 times. My first time was a 15. My second time was a 17. I had a 2 twice on the verbal reasoning on both those exams. And the point I'm getting at is that if you continue to do the same things, you'll get the same results. But if you're starting to see that your results aren't moving, that's when you have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what do I have to do differently to obtain better scores and to do better? And for me, it was, and student Dr. Cruz spoke about it, was the reading part. I was not a very strong reader at all. So what I had to do was I had to challenge myself to get outside of my comfort zone and read things that I did not want to read. And so what I started doing was 2 to 3 times a day I'd read, or 2 to 3 passages I would read on theeconomist.com. And I would just read articles that I did not like and that would make me cringe if I looked at them. But I needed to read them so I could get comfortable with reading things that make me uncomfortable. And I would also do 3 to 4 passages a day on the exam crackers for the verbal reasoning section. And that ultimately helped me increase my score from a 2 to a 6, and I was able to then, get a better score that allowed me to enter medical school.
And so, with respect to test prep, can I ask you your name? Mallory. Hi, Mallory. I'm Joseph. Very nice to meet you. Okay, Mallory, I'd like to ask you. You have some very lovely shoes on there. Is it okay if I ask you what size your shoes are?
That's fine. 9.
Okay, so those aren't men's 12?
No.
Okay, so even though Mallory has lovely shoes here, they won't fit my feet. And I left my heels at home, so we're kind of, thank you for it. So the point being, it's a silly illustration, but no matter how good something looks on someone else, for example, Mallory's shoes on her feet, it won't necessarily be good for the next person. So that's especially true when it comes to test prep, okay? Some people study well in groups, okay? You get in a room full of 12, 13, 14 people, you're bouncing ideas, you're asking questions, and by the end of the day, you're 2 or 3 IQ points smarter than you were before you came in the room. I get in a room with 14, 15 people, and we tell jokes the whole time, and I've laughed, and I've had a great time, but I haven't learned anything new. So you have to be aware, and you already are aware of what works for you and what doesn't. And you don't want to change necessarily those methods for the MCAT.
So different styles of learning will also be helpful to employ when you are studying for your exam. One of the things is that we all have different styles of learning, correct? So one of the things that you said, Shantae, right, is that you like looking at pictures, correct? So it's more of a visual style of learning versus some are like have to hear podcasts or be able to put CDs in the car, more of an auditory type of learner, or some that you remember from organic chemistry that had to get the bonds, breaking them apart, doing all those type of things, or making up experiments, are more of a tactile or a kinesthetic learner. But how many of you feel like you are kind of a combination of both of these? I know I felt the same way too. One of the things that I had to do was learn how to start to employ both of these styles of learning. For me, visual and auditory, in order to help out. So what I would do is I would actually make flashcards up and I would talk. I would say the flashcards out loud, speak them out loud, and then while I'm looking at it, it would make me have two ways of remembering it. One, I can think about like, oh, I remember hearing myself say that. The other way is I can remember seeing it on that flashcard. And so we all have kind of combination styles of learning, but we usually have one dominant style. So if you want to learn more about it, just you can go online to look up different learning style tests that's available. Like you can just Google it, or you can even go to your career services center that's here as well and be able to take one of those tests to find.
So these skills are going to be helpful for those exams. They're going to help you get the most questions that you can right, because you're going to have a strategy to go through a standardized test. So right now, what you all should be doing is focusing on your coursework and getting a good understanding of the basic like science concepts, so that when you go back and prepare for your Mcat, you have a solid understanding of that and you can go and practice taking the test instead of having to learn something for the first time. The next thing is going to be time management. A lot of the time is just trying to figure out, like you've heard with the Mcat 2015, is what does your schedule look like? Can you set realistic goals? Or how do I set realistic goals of what I'm going to accomplish and when I'm going to accomplish that? People have very different ways of studying for the Mcat or for standardized tests. Some people require 6 months of time. Some people require 3 months of time. It just depends, and it's going to take you learning what works best for you, setting up a calendar, some accountability markers, and then making sure that you have ways of keeping yourself on time and accomplishing those short-term goals. So the other key point that I want to make is practice, practice, practice. Practice in the real-time conditions. If your test is at 8 o'clock in the morning, start practicing at 8 o'clock in the morning, because if you're used to getting up at 11 and then go sit for an 8 o'clock test, you're not going to wake up till noon, and that's halfway through your exam, or almost completely through your exam. So practice. Give yourself timed test conditions. So the other thing that I want to make clear here is that reviewing is going to be essential. This exam is going back from the practice test that you took and reviewing those sessions over. So this is looking at the questions that you got wrong and also looking at the questions that you got right. What mistakes did I make? What concepts do I keep getting wrong? Did I understand the question? Did I understand the answers? So it's going to take about 2 to 3 times longer to review the test than it's going to take to actually sit through the timed exam.
So I think that what I want to emphasize is more of the long-term planning that's involved with taking a test of this nature. Studying for the Mcat, as my colleagues have mentioned, starts the first day of class. When you go into that biology class and you start hearing about these principles, that's when the learning and preparation for a test like this starts taking place. And preparing for the exam involves not only the classes that you'll be taking, but making sure that when you want to take the exam is available for you, making sure that the testing facility offers the exam, making sure that you will receive your test scores and your test transcript will be available to be distributed to the institutions that you'll be applying to by their respective deadlines. So in terms of preparing for the exam, we wanted to give you information about knowing when you have to register, but most importantly, knowing when you'll need the scores and knowing whether the testing facility offers the exam for you. The AAMC website, I believe it was student Dr. Stringfellow who provided information about the frequently asked questions. If you go to that same website, you'll be provided with a rough calendar, and the calendar states when the exam is offered. The exam is usually offered in the spring and with various dates throughout the fall, but it's very heavily situated around the months of February, March, April, May, and June. Why? Because students are studying for the exam at around this these dates so that so that the schools that they apply to can receive their transcript by the time that they start interviewing applicants for medical school. Make sure that when you go in and you take the exam, that you're prepared to take the exam. The last thing that you want to do is to have to retake and restudy for the exam.